Lydia Wakefield started her day with a cup of coffee and whatever her youngest child would not finish for breakfast as she rushed him and her oldest out the door and into the car to ensure they would not be late for school. While dropping them off, she would meet up with the rest of the PTA moms to catch up on things. It was usually gossip or what the next fundraiser goal would be and who would be baking what. By the way, Lydia, her childhood friend Margot, spoke up, getting her attention since she had been zoning out during the whole conversation that always left her out every time. Yeah, Lydia cleared her throat and looked up from her thermos of now cold coffee. Well, my next door neighbor, the one with the Tesla, she asked if I wanted to join her book club. They found this old book that has never been released to the public before. Margot twirled a blonde curl around her index finger as she spoke, looking at each one of them, trying to see if anyone was interested in joining as well, but they all declined. Lydia frowned, seeing the disappointment on her friend's face, and placed a hand on her shoulder. I will join the book club with you. I have some free time when James comes home from work, so he can watch the kids for at least a little while. Margot's bright eyes lit up. Thank you, Lydia. I knew I could count on you. She nodded and proceeded to leave the school and head home for the day. Lydia went about her day doing her daily chores and planning out what to make for dinner that week, since she had usually packed leftovers for lunches. When James came home with the kids, she walked up to him, giving him a big hug and asking how his day went. He gave her a tired nod and his usual, "It was work" response. Lydia smiled and held his hand for a short while before he went to go shower and sit down to dinner with his family. During that time, she would bring up the book club. Margot asked if I would join a book club with her, Lydia casually brought up, poking her fork into the green beans on her plate. James tilted his head to the side, chewing a bit of meatloaf before responding. The blonde? I honestly didn't think she had ever picked up a book before. The children snickered and his wife pouted. James, she scolded, and he shrugged, taking another bite before sipping his drink. He always disliked Margot ever since they had met back in high school when she had introduced James as her boyfriend back then. James told Lydia that Margot was clingy and always got her into some type of trouble. If you want to go, I don't mind watching the kids for a while. Thank you. James nodded and finished his meal, gathering up the empty plates to wash them in the kitchen. The following day, Lydia met up with Margot to walk over to her next-door neighbor's house. A woman with dark, slicked-back hair tied into a high ponytail answered the door. Margot, it's so good to see you, she greeted with a smile, and it faded when she looked at Lydia. Oh, you brought a friend with you. Is that okay? I'm sorry, I should have asked, Margot pouted, and the woman brushed it off. It's perfectly fine. The more the merrier, the woman muttered and looked at Lydia with a forced smile. Welcome to the book club. Lydia shuddered at the look this woman was giving her and knew that she definitely did not want her here. Margot gave her a reassuring look and led the way inside, where they joined a few other women in the living room. Everyone, this is Margot and Lydia Wakefield. The woman sighed and rolled her eyes. Mrs. Wakefield. Some greeted her, while others ignored her and put their attention on Margot. Lydia was used to being ignored, but this felt off. Yes, she was used to Margot getting all the attention wherever they went, but they seemed obsessed with her. Could this book club be some sort of guise to cover up a cult? Now let's begin reading from the book, the leader of the book club began, taking out a leather-bound tome. The front was scarred and cracked, a lock on its surface long, broken, and forgotten. When she opened it, the tome's pages were yellowed and brittle, filling the room with sense of dust and decay. She sat upright with a smile on her face, reading aloud in an unknown language. It did not appear to be Latin nor anything Lydia had ever heard before. A few of the other women clapped their hands, saying something akin to an amen. Margot tilted her head and clapped along with them before speaking up. What's the translation? The woman looked up from the book in her hands. The blonde smiled. We do not need a translation to know what the words mean, Margot. If you close your eyes and open your heart, you can feel them. You can hear his voice speaking directly to your mind. She smiled and her eyes locked on Margot's. Who is he? You said that you can hear his voice, Lydia spoke up, causing the others to look at her. The woman closed the book, and a look of disgust spread across her face. You have just joined us, and yet you dare ask what his name is? First, you must prove yourself before we will ever allow you to utter his name. Prove myself? We just joined today, Lydia thought to herself, raising an eyebrow inquisitively. The woman held her head high and looked away, her eyes settling on the group. You are dismissed for today. Please return next weekend for another reading. As Margot and Lydia left together and out of earshot, she spoke up. There is something wrong with that book club. Oh, you're just imagining things. Margot brushed her off with a sigh. Margot, I'm telling you those people are a cult. The blonde stopped in her tracks, looking at her childhood friend. Lydia, her voice was stern, and her arms crossed in front of her. If you keep saying such things, weird rumors will start to spread and innocent people will get hurt, so why don't you keep it to yourself? But Margot, enough, Lydia! The blonde turned on her heel. I'll see you next weekend. Without another word, she went inside her house, leaving Lydia completely alone. She needed to stop this, but how could she? Margot did not believe her. She thought it was just some gimmick to get people to join the book club. How could she prove that they were bad people? Lydia could not quit and leave Margot alone with those people. Her conscience would not allow her to. She would just have to continue to attend and find some proof of what was going on between the lines that Margot was too oblivious to see. When the weekend rolled around, Lydia was running a bit behind and arrived late at the club meeting. She reached out a hand to knock on the door, only to find it slightly ajar. Curious, Lydia pushed the door open with her foot and stepped inside. The entrance was dimly lit and void of any life. Gently shutting the door behind her, she continued further inside, squinting her eyes to see better in the darkness. Was that sound from the basement? Next to the stairs was an open door with a red light spilling out across the floor and the walls. Taking a deep breath, Lydia exhaled slowly, taking her time walking down the stairs, where she found herself in an open room with a sacrificial altar in the middle. On top of it was Margot, dressed in white robes with her eyes closed. She slowly made her way over, gently shaking her childhood friend. Margot, Lydia spoke in an intense whisper, glancing around them. You're late, Mrs. Wakefield. Lydia turned, seeing the woman with the slick-back dark hair and a high ponytail. She turned to face her, her brows knitting in a furrowed expression. Lydia clenched her hands into fists down at her sides. What had they done to Margot? What did you do to her? My, Mrs. Wakefield, I did not know you were capable of such anger. I thought we were doing you a favor. Doing me a favor? Margot is my best friend. Why would I want anything to happen to her? The woman grinned and walked up to the altar. Either way, you are too late. She will not wake up until the ritual is over. Why don't you finish it for us? She turned to Lydia, handing over a yellowed page. All you have to do is read the words on the page. She held the page in her hand, looking at the ancient dialect before her. Finish it? No, Lydia was not going to do that, was she? Before she knew it, her lips moved on their own, speaking aloud the words which were foreign to her. Margot began to cough, her eyes opening, their usual light color turning pitch black, completely engulfing even the sclera. The coughing became worse, and then the gargling started as Margot spat up blood. The sound of bone and flesh being torn and cracked filled the air, and when Lydia looked down, she gasped, almost bumping into one of the members who held her by the shoulders. Watch with us, Lydia, and gaze upon his arrival. The woman raised her arms in the air. They chanted a name, something which came out in gibberish when it was spoken. Volgron, Volgron, Volgron. Just what was Volgron? As Lydia questioned this, she watched as a creature crawled its way out of Margot's broken open ribcage. It moved and writhed, its blood-drenched body emerging from the broken body under it. She looked up at it, frozen in fear. The creature's body was a blend of corded muscle and jagged bloodstone. Its eyes burned like molten embers, flickering like fire. hooked horns curved downwards from its skull, its clawed hands dripping with blood. When it roared, the sound was a symphony of death itself, echoing off the walls. Whatever this thing was filled Lydia with dread, and now she had released it onto the world.